So this morning I woke up to my mother sending me a bunch of stuff on Skype. Yay. She sent me this link to uh, a non reputable website, and basically they said, oh, reversal of previous study finds that transitioning surgically does not help trans people. I was like, okay. And they were like, based on what? And so I read the thing because she linked it, and it basically referenced that the Psychiatry Journal of America had a publishing in it saying this. I was like, okay, fine, let's go read that. And they didn't have a link to the source, and I found out real quick why. Um, so I double checked this on the American uh, Psychiatric Society website as well, and they have the original study cited, and then the link to the addendum, and then the author's note, and then the addendum. So all of it's there. Anyone can read it. I'll put a link if you want, but especially specifically to the addendum. But essentially, some uh you know people in Sweden realized that since they have universal health care, lucky dogs, that you can tell citizens with generalized information without having to put names or anything who has what medical issues and also has transitioned or professes to be trans. So they took their entire country and took every single trans person, didn't put any names to it or anything like that at all, and then said, this is how many times they've been hospitalized for attempting suicide. Here's how many times that they've had these psych issues or this mental health condition or whatever. They then did a thing where they showed that the people who had had surgery had a progression of basically successful mental health decreasing as after their transition, specifically that it kept mentally increasing their health for like about a decade, about 10 years, and then after that it just plateaued right off. So basically you transition and get the surgery. You don't just transition by taking HRT, you specifically get the surgeries to have bottom and top surgeries. And then you, for the next 10 years, can see an improvement in your mental health that you get to keep. And it doesn't go away, it just stops increasing after the 10 years. Well, they thought this was a great thing. Well, then some other dudes came along and said, no, 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 no. Mathematically, statistically, you're not doing this with sound math. You're doing this with a scientific mind, and that's all great and everything, but you got to have the math in there. And you got to do this in a way that shows, like, how much progress, because you should expect, in order to recommend any treatment to anyone, a certain percentage of improvement, and so on and so forth. And they were like, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. So they went and did it. And I looked at a couple of their graphs and everything from them doing it. And basically, what they found was maybe there's improvement, but it's not a marked enough improvement to be worth recommending surgery so strongly. And that the previous study, which basically affirmed recommending surgery, was too hasty and too strong. It didn't say that there's no improvement, first of all. And secondly, it basically said, you don't recommend. I mean, this is my own example. This isn't an example from their document. You don't recommend, say, surgery to a cancer patient when there's only a 5% chance that the surgery would help them. It's higher than that. It was about 20% or something like that. But they were still like, if only 20% get an improvement from the surgery, then you wouldn't recommend it to them, or whatever was their finding that they decided upon. And then the author even wrote a thing about why they did that. And so they actually wrote a letter about why they went back and restudied the study. Again, no one was ever talked to for this study. It was just like the statistics because their universal health care is also shown with their citizen markers. So they can see stuff like that. And one of the biggest things that the mathematical side did was they took every single person who had not had surgery who was trans and every person who had had surgery who was trans, and they basically compared them together. And they said, do you have a, a more marked improvement by having surgery than the people who didn't? And the answer was no. It was pretty negligible, the difference between how much either side had improved. And again, after about 10 years, it plateaus out anyway. And they were like, it's not a permanent increase in mental health anyway. So then the addendum comes. The addendum is very interesting. First of all, the biggest thing that I took from the addendum and really hit home is flat out they said a whole bunch of stuff about, well, I'll say the thing that hit home first. They said, you did this purely mathematically, and you had to do it mathematically, assume that all the people who didn't have the surgery wanted the surgery. That they would have improved in mental health if they had had the surgery, if your math would have been in order for your math to be predictable. But the thing is not all trans people want surgeries, or even want all surgeries. Maybe they just want one. The thing is these are people. It's not just a mathematical statistic. In Sweden, they have universal health care. The people who don't have the surgery are very likely people who aren't interested yet in having the surgery, because they have access to having the surgery if they actually want it. So it is very fallible to do the math, putting the two side by side and saying, oh, why isn't there a marked improvement over the people who took HRT over the people who took surgeries? The answer is really, really obvious. The people who got surgeries wanted the surgeries, so they had a marked improvement. The people who didn't want the surgeries didn't get the surgeries, and they had a marked improvement. Neither of them had a more marked improvement than the other. Ta-da! Really straightforward and simple. But if you're only viewing it as mathematical and you're not viewing it as scientific, then really obvious why you could stumble there. He said a whole bunch of stuff about how it's frustrating because this was the first study done of its kind where it tried to take an entire nation's population, and he encourages more nations to do so. He was like, basically, there needs to be more studies like this that aren't done on small cultural environments and stuff, because that's the bias that we have skewing information on this anyway, is that when they do a study, it's like, 200 people from New York, instead of an entire state or even country's worth of people, of every single person across the board. It's very difficult. The other thing that was interesting is they put in their mathematical thing the rate of detransition as the world's rate of detransition, not Sweden's rate of detransition, which automatically skews the math. Like, I don't know why they thought that was a smart idea. If every single aspect of the thing is based on Sweden, you can't do one single aspect not based on Sweden. And part of the reasoning is they don't know the full actual detransition rate for Sweden in and of itself comparable to the world. But at the same time, that's no reason to not figure that out, or else to not omit that. But they thought it would be more of a fallacy to omit detransitioning. I think it's more of a fallacy to put the wrong number for detransitioning. Even besides that, the rate of regret for detransitioners is still minuscule. It's exceedingly small. People make such a big deal out of detransitioners when it's, 2.7 for regret, and then 0.8 or something like that percent of all trans people worldwide that have been known for all the studies that have been done on it so far actually wish that they had never transitioned in the first place and tried to attempt to detransition. most of the people who have regrets about it still don't even actively try to detransition. And again, the regret rate is, again, I think the last time I looked, it was 2.7. It's ridiculously small of all trans people. Like, it's a smaller, again, a smaller regret rate. I think I've said this before because I've heard doctors say this before. It's a smaller regret rate than people getting LASIK eye surgery. And yet people make such a big deal about detransitioning. It's so stupid. Anyway, so the freaking addendum is included, and the final conclusion, not just substantiated in our country, in the United States of America, but in all the other first world countries who looked at this study, is that surgery is still to be recommended to those who actually want the surgery. For people who are on the fence, no. For people who are not interested in surgery, no. It's still the same substantiated finding. And again, this is not just by the Psychiatry Journal of America, it's also by the Psychiatric Society, the American Psychiatric Society. Like, you can go look at other countries, the same substantiation has been found. So she basically sent me bullcrap. So I told her, here's from the actual articles, here's the source. I fact checked what you sent me. And she's like, oh no, the article I found's from September 1st. So automatically it trumps anything that you found that's from a published paper from before that. And I was like, this isn't how fact checking works. Your website is not a reputable website. This is from the actual source who published the freaking documents. So maybe your website published a quote unquote article about it later, but your website published an article not based on the full information available on September 1st. And also, just because it did publish something on September 1st doesn't mean that that is the more correct information. Like, it's so dumb. It's like, if I say today, I have a little curl going on in my beard and it curls forward, okay? And then someone else who's not me, who hasn't even seen a picture of me, says, oh no, you don't have a beard that curls forward, that's ridiculous. But they do it after I've already said something. That doesn't change that I'm the one who has the beard and knows if my beard curls forward. Like, they're not right just because they said something later. The original document is going to be the document that's the most true. It's just like she thinks that the Bible that exists currently nowadays wouldn't exist unless God wanted it to. So all of the people who've, mistranslated or added things to the modern day Bible and made it the way that it is, and it doesn't at all look like the original documents at all, like, all of that makes sense to her. Like, the Bible that's out now has to be the right Bible instead of the original Greek and Hebrew documents that we have access to. It's so illogical. It's so irrational. It doesn't make sense. She also wanted to argue with me about, oh, well, you're just looking for information to suit the narrative that you want to live by. And I was like, no, I'm not. I'm fact checking. I encourage anyone and everyone to fact check. Fact checking, I've said it multiple times just in making these, I guess it's a vlog, this video journal that I've got going on. Fact check, please, fact check. It's an important and good thing to do. Never be isolated with one source of information or even two sources of information. Go look. Go find the root source of whatever's going on. Like, don't be ignorant. Save yourself from that. Do it. Go fact check. She was like, you just, whatever. And I was like, actually, I've gotten a second opinion at this point about my hormone imbalance and how much I need to go on testosterone to have a healthier life. both physically and mentally. And she was like, oh, well, you always wanted to be a boy, so you convinced the doctors to convince you to be trans. I started laughing so hard. I was like, that's so silly. No! The doctors found that I naturally produce a whole crap load of testosterone in male ranges, and, congratulations me, that means that I'm a boy. Uh, I was like, I haven't taken testing to see if I'm intersex, but I'm getting treated because I've done the rigor of going through the therapy, and I've done the rigor of getting certified that my gender dysphoria is medically based and not just from some underlying mental health disorder or something, that it is on my medical record, and now I'm getting a lot of the same rights that an intersex person gets instead of just your basic trans care. Because I've done the work with the medical health professionals who have degrees. I even got a second opinion. And she's like, oh, well, you're just going to choose what you're going to choose. And I'm like, if God made me, and God doesn't make mistakes, and God made me with a body that is boy on the inside, then I'm a boy. And I accept that. Why can't you? And she's like, you need to accept yourself as you are right now. And I'm like, with horrible hormone imbalance and health issues? No. There's lots of people who don't accept that. And that's not bad. It's not bad to not want to be unhealthy. I accept that I'm a boy. I don't need to give myself some weird narrative where I'm part girl, part boy, or whatever. I am not happy as a non-binary. I've tried that for 6.5 years. Non-binary did not work for me. Non-binary doesn't work. I'm a boy. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. I'm like, maybe it's not what you want to hear, that I'm a boy. But medically speaking, it has been determined that I'm a boy. And that going on testosterone is the number one thing that I can do to improve my health. Across the board. It will improve my teeth. My pH balance means my teeth have holes and grooves in them all over the place. And I've had that problem since I was a child. And the dentist didn't know why. They just would make jokes that I have the grooviest teeth they ever saw. I will freaking not maybe have chronic depression anymore. That all by itself is just tremendous to me. But even besides that, apparently part of my asthmatic issues in my breathing, it'll possibly help because my muscles will change in my throat from my deepening voice and my Adam's apple dropping, and that could help me with my breathing. And my airway opening up, because when I wheeze, I don't wheeze down here in my diaphragm. I wheeze up here in my upper trachea and my throat. Which is why they thought, well, maybe I don't have traditional asthma, and they started doing testing on flail chest, and then they thought maybe I do have flail chest, and then I stopped testing because I don't finish testing, but whatever. That's a whole other story, me not finishing testing. The point is, my calcium absorption issues just gone if I start taking testosterone, which would help with my stage 2 arthritis I have all up in my body. Like, my health, my physical health, not just my mental health, improves if I start taking testosterone because I have male levels going on, but they're sickly male levels. And she can't accept that. She can't accept that because my body is a spiritual issue, which is bullcrap. My body is a body. It is not a spiritual issue. If medically this is the accepted result, I'm already considered male. Medically, I am considered male. After the freaking election, I get to start changing that gender marker for the government, but according to doctors, I'm already male. Like, it's already a done deal. And it's not something that I had to choose or not choose to a certain degree because it was already true. My whole life I wished I was a boy, but that's not why I'm a boy. Even though that would be fine and that would help and all of that, but I actually have a medical reason to be a boy. And I sometimes feel guilty about that. I have a couple of trans friends, and one of them, like, they've been on the minimum dose of testosterone possible, and for 2 years trying so hard to push and to get doctors to give them more so that they can actually start transitioning instead of just having like this weird, you're taking testosterone but nothing's really happening with your body. I'm not taking testosterone and stuff's already happening with my body. I have inch-long chest hairs. I have a freaking beard that curls forward. I have body hair up the wazoo. I have body hair in my butt crack. Like, I have it everywhere. You know, when I hear trans boys talking about that is after they've been on testosterone, not before. And I'm so sorry to the poor trans people who don't have the luxury of not going on testosterone. You poor things. I feel so bad. Because even if I am sickly levels of testosterone, at least I have some semblance of male-ish levels of testosterone. And I realize that that all by itself means that I've got it made in some ways. But at the same time, I didn't know that almost my entire freaking life. My whole life has been a non-stop mess of me being broken and depressed. And she's all like, oh, if you get this surgery, I don't want you to end up broken and depressed. And I'm like, woman, I have been that my whole life. You know I have. And she's like, that's why I don't want you to risk it getting worse. And I said, at first I was scared. What if it got worse? Because I can't handle it being worse. I was scared of that. But I'm not scared of that anymore. I was scared of that before I understood just how much of a hormone imbalance I have. Like, before then, people talking to me about it, it was just sort of words coming from a scary doctor that I'm scared of and I don't want to listen to. Even though they're saying that I could be a boy, and being a boy is what I've wanted my whole life, I didn't want to hear them because they were doctors. But I understand now. I understand that kid that was struggling and didn't know what was wrong and why nothing was working, and I accept that kid. I accept me growing up and me going through life and me even going through my adulthood. I accept all of the confusion and the struggle and the depression and the suicide attempts and the just non-stop issues that I had my whole life. And I am impressed with myself. I survived all of it. I am a strong person. I am so strong. So very strong. And I'm already happier than I've ever been with myself. And I haven't even taken a drop of testosterone yet. My hormone balance is still just as imbalanced. And yet, presenting myself as male, even if I haven't actually done the things to, like, quote unquote, make me more male, has helped me tremendously. Knowing that there's male something inside of me helps me so tremendously. It is absolutely comforting to me that something inside me is male. I have had to live my entire life distraught over something inside me being female. And finally, I have something inside me that's male. And finally, it's not me wishing I was a boy. I'm being told that I'm a boy. And I'm not doing that because I convinced them to convince me. That's just the weirdest thing. Our girlfriend was like, I've been trying to tell you for years that you should get this checked on and that maybe you're trans, and you have recoiled and run from it almost the entire time because you've been so scared of it. That's not a person who convinces someone of anything. But even besides what my girlfriend said, it's just the obvious truth. I'm a boy, and it's hard to accept a thing when you've seen a different thing your whole life. I can forgive being shocked. I can forgive it taking time to learn the pronouns because you have a habit there. I have no problems with that. None at all. But refusing to accept sound medical advice with a second opinion on the sound medical advice, coming to the exact same, conclusion, it's like ridiculous. I also talked to my father for the first time last night since he told me he wouldn't buy into it. I had talked to my mom a little bit, just a little before that, and so I knew when he called and he started talking about how he was gonna finally get his robot feet and have his ankles all pulled out and replaced with metal and everything like that. I understood why he was calling. He was calling because he's been talking about wanting the surgery for years and he's finally getting it. So I tried to just listen. And then he started talking about my mom. And he apparently had spilled peanut oil in front of the staircase and she slipped on it and fell down the stairs. And so he was teasing her and making fun of her for not watching where she was going and for her not having balance and being blind and blah 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 blah. And I was like, you just so angry. And he kept being like, "Are you still there?" And I'll be like, "Mm-hmm." And I just was dripping anger and I just wasn't saying almost a thing. So then he finally was like, well, how are things going with you? And I don't know. I just had enough. And I said, "Do you really want to know, or are you just feeling air?" And he's like, "Well, why wouldn't I want to know?" And I said, "Because the last time we spoke, you told me my health doesn't matter to you and that you don't buy into it, even though medically it would help me to transition, and that you will not call me your son." And he was like, "Well, I didn't mean to imply that your health doesn't matter. I'm sorry if that's what it sounded like. I wasn't saying your health doesn't matter." And I said, "Good, because I've gotten a second opinion and my health does matter and I am transitioning." And I just kind of went off. And then I went from that. I don't know how he felt about it because he didn't say, and I was kind of just on a roll. And I was like, and if you want to look out for your own health, you need to start treating her better because you want to get taken care of in your old age. She's who's doing it, and she's a great caretaker. She's out of your league. I told him that to him on the phone, and he was like, "Well, I know that." And I was like, "Well, then act like it." And I kind of just, I said, "What was the second thing you said after your medical stuff? You started teasing her. Treat her better." And he was like, I know, sometimes I have off days. I'm sorry. I have off days." And he started explaining that they had compromised. So the new plan is they'll move up to Alaska and live there 6 months out of the year, and the other 6 months out of the year they're going to travel and go see grandchildren and children and all of that stuff. So mom told him, because mom then got on the phone with me later after I got done talking with dad, and she told me that they had thought about it because I had made her feel so good. She said, "After talking to you, I just you made me feel so much better. Like my entire day went so much better." And I was like, "If you ever need built up, you just let me know. I will build you up 100% of the times that you need it. I will always." I was like, "There needs to be a 100-foot statue dedicated to you, in my opinion." And she was like, "Oh," but basically he had, she hadn't told me that yet, but he was like, um, and I'm gonna help work on the house, and we're not leaving until the summer, and she's not retiring till the summer and stuff. And that way there's not as much of a rush on it and everything. And that way, you know, I'll be up walking and everything and stuff after my surgeries and stuff. So, some compromises there. And I said, okay, that sounds better. That sounds better, because again, I wasn't supposed to tell him that I knew about what he had demanded in the first place. So I didn't mention any of that. But I did say, okay, so 6 months, you're going to be in Alaska a year. And he's like, yeah. And I was like, so who's going to take care of grandma the other 6 months? Because you need to be thinking about that. And he's like, oh, well, I'm sure she'll get some help from somewhere. And I was like, nah, you need to nail that down. She has 5 other kids. And he's like, well, she doesn't really, because, this uncle has this excuse and this uncle has this excuse. And, your aunt, she hasn't retired yet for 2 more years, and so on and so forth. And I said, no, you have an excuse. You're getting robot feet. And he's like, yeah, but I'm the oldest son. I feel it's my responsibility. And I said, and I understand that. I get that very much. That's why you're living with her 6 months out of the year. But the other 6 months out of the year, the rest of them can all take turns. And he's like, yeah, but what if that's hard for them? And I said, if you isolate mom up there in the backwoods of Alaska, she is a spirited woman, and her literal identity is wrapped up in being a mom. She is the most nurturing, kind person. You have to respect that and let her see her grandkids and her grandbabies. Her kids and her grandbabies. Sorry, I said that wrong. And he was like, well, I will, we will. And I was like, so other people have to take care of grandma, and you have to take care of your wife. And he's like, I will. I'm just like, he's like, okay, fine. Do you want to talk to your mom? And so then I ended up talking to my mom for like 3 hours. But we were laughing and having a good time. It was good. It was a very good chat with my mom, and she was so pleased. She was like, it went so much better. Everything went so much better. I was like, well, good, because I was about ready to drive all the way across the country just so I could slap him upside the head and turn around and drive back. And she was laughing so hard at that. It was pretty funny. She has worked so hard at her job and for so long. Like, she is some of the glue that holds that place together. And she has been so stressed. One of the girls is on maternity leave. She's pregnant. She's going to be on maternity leave soon. And then, Beth, my sister, who's closest in age to me, she had cancer, and my mom was taking care of her and stuff. And she said that was super scary, but that they got all the cancer, thankfully. It hadn't gotten out of the uterine walls or out of the ovaries. So it was all contained in those organs. So thankfully, taking those out fixed stuff. And my sister will have to be on estrogen, progesterone for the rest of her life. But being on hormones for the rest of your life is a lot better than being dead. So, and she actually went back to work for the first time yesterday. So, she got super exhausted, but she's a strong woman, my sister. Like, I'm very proud of her, and I'm proud of my mom for doing that and dealing with that. My mom said, though, that, she went ahead and went to put in her notice, and her boss was like, no, you can't do that. And she was like, well, I thought it would be like nice if I retired on my birthday. And she was like, no. If you retire on your birthday, then that'll be too soon. That's too soon. It's tax season. And we always get audited because we're a multi-million-dollar business and blah, 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 blah. And it's funny that the people who work for the multimillionaires are poor. But that's a whole other story. Anyway, but my mom was like, no, I mean, it was symbolic to retire on my birthday when I turned 62. And she was like, her boss was like, no, if you wait till after, you can help with tax season and everything, and you can retire like June 1st, maybe even May 1st. I'll let you go once stuff's taken care of. And since it'll be past your birthday, you'll be technically in retirement age. I will give you all your vacation time. Now, my mom has worked there for forever, and even though she gets, what is it, like 3 weeks of vacation time a year, she's only allowed to use, because of how difficult the job is and how demanding her boss that's over her is, she only gets to use like 6 days of that a year. So her vacation time has accumulated and accumulated and accumulated. So my mom said she's going to be paid a paycheck for finishing up getting the house ready and moving up to Alaska and all that kind of stuff. All of that. I I don't remember what she said. It was either 120 days or 200 days or something like that. And she gets to keep all of it. And she was scared she wouldn't get any of it. And she was like, I went in there worried that I was going to have to be like, well, maybe my vacation time could be like a bargaining chip or something. And instead, she said it. So I don't even have to feel guilty that I was like being manipulative or something, because it was her idea. And I was like, aw, I'm so proud of you, Mom. You're so smart. And she's like, I'm proud of me too. I can't believe it that happened. So, yeah, she gets all her vacation time, which is good. She deserves it. She has worked so many unpaid overtime hours at that place. She deserves every single one of those vacation days. Um, there's been many a day my mom's supposed to get off work at 4, and instead she got off work at like 7:30 or 9 at night. And that's just been constant, a consistent thing. There's been plenty of times she had to go work on Saturday, and they only pay so much overtime. So everything you do over that, and maybe that's changed in recent years. I think that did change a couple of years ago because they started being required to pay overtime for every single hour that she worked overtime. But up until then, it wasn't an enforced thing at all. That a person works overtime and gets paid their overtime. So my mom just did the work anyway. So I'm very glad that she's getting her overtime because she deserves it. But yeah, I kind of told my dad off a little, but he seemed to respect that, so that's good. And he again, I don't know how he feels about the second opinion on my transition and stuff, and I told him about my appointment coming up, and about that I'll probably be on testosterone by the end of October, and by the end of November I'll probably be starting the work of getting my name changed and stuff. I don't know how he feels about all that, but I did tell him, which is a big deal because I also told my mom, and she, of course, my mom, I know exactly how she feels about it because she was like, "Oh, that's so great. Oh, I'm so happy for you. That's wonderful, honey." Like, my mom is the epitome. Like, my mom should give other moms lessons on how to be a good mom. Not my birth mother, but my mom. My mom has earned the title of mom. She deserves it. Like, if there's a Best Mom of the Year award, I would vote for my mom. Absolutely. Like, I would encourage everyone to vote for my mom. My mom is a good mom. But, it's really true. She's out of my dad's league. I can't believe he made fun of her after he spilled oil on the floor and she fell down the stairs. What a... Just, sometimes. Sometimes I just gotta yell some sense into that boy. Anyway. Remind him his marriage is a partnership. Misogyny land isn't welcome here. And I know it's partially how he grew up. And I know it's partially my grandmother. But at the same time, he needs to have more sense than that. And even if he doesn't care about the world, and even if he doesn't care about the country, he needs to care about his wife. That's my opinion. And I will enforce that. I mean, I couldn't yell at him about how he spoke to me, but I will yell at him about how he speaks to his wife, and then me just apparently came along with it. It worked out, hopefully. So apparently I can talk to my father again, which is in a way good because he's not all bad. He's just so misguided lately, completely ignorant. And my mother, again, has always been ignorant, but not my father. My father's been like this middle ground thing where part of him's conservative and part of him's not stupid. And it's like, which it's a pity that conservatism at this point is associated with stupidity, but at the same time, there's statistical analysis to support that. The less educated um, tends to be more conservative. Um, you can look it up. It's a known issue. Anyway, especially in this country specifically, the studies I'm thinking of are about this country. Um, but yeah. Oh my gosh, I was talking to my father, and he tried to bring up protesters, uh, in a negative way and stuff, and cops in a positive way, and he was like, I'm just so glad I've never been in any situation where I've ever needed to be scared of a police officer. And I was like, I have. And he's like, oh. And I told him and explained the situation. He's like, oh, well, I'm glad nothing like that's happened to me. And I didn't even tell him the worst one, the one that I actually have PTSD about. But, and I've never ever broken the law. That's the big thing. Sometimes police just, they're having a bad day and they want someone to take it out on. And congratulations, you won the lucky straw. Um, it sucks to be that person, but it is what it is with that. Police need better training. They need training on how to de-escalate instead of escalate situations and how to better control their tempers. But that's a whole other thing. Anyway, so we were talking and stuff, and he's trying to like lean it back towards, well, if people would comply. And so then I was like, sure, they need to comply, but that's no excuse for a police officer to shoot them. Just because someone's running away when they're told to stop by an officer does not automatically mean that the officer is then an executioner. That person needs to be taken before a judge and before a jury, and they decide what happens to the person and what the punishment is. The officer doesn't decide life or death in that moment. Just because they committed a crime or they didn't comply or whatever it is does not mean that they need to be shot. And he's like, well, uh, yeah, I guess that's true. I guess things do need to be better, everywhere and stuff. I just want there to be justice. And I was like, me too. I'm so relieved that at least today they announced some semblance of justice for Breonna Taylor's family. And he's like, who's that? Is that a protester? And I was like, Breonna Breonna Taylor was a uh award-winning EMT. She was an award-winning EMT who the police officers did not knock. They just barged into her house in the middle of the night looking for a criminal who was already in custody, found her sleeping in her bed and shot her 8 times while she was sleeping. And he was like, "What? I didn't hear about that." And I was like, "Yeah, I wonder why. Get your news from more than one source." But I didn't say that. Instead, I explained the situation. I explained that they finally made a settlement with her family and that Louisville is going to do some police reforms and stuff because of everything that happened, because that's not okay. And he was like, well, yeah, I guess that's not okay. And I said, the thing is it wouldn't have been okay even if it had been the criminal they had been looking for. Even if it was the criminal asleep in the bed, you don't barge into a house without knocking and then shoot someone who's asleep 8 times. Even if it hadn't been her in the bed, it was still wrong. He was a little quiet for that. So stupid. I was talking to my mom a little bit about some of that stuff, And I was like, should I not talk about this? Does politics upset you? Because I know you don't like to talk to Dad about it. And she said, no, not at all. You're rational. I was like, oh, okay. She's like, I can't talk to him because he's not rational about it. She's like, it makes complete sense if you're rational. And then if you're irrational, it's just like, why are we talking about this? So she called me my name. I haven't gotten my name changed yet, but I've been going by my name that, she helped me pick out. Or my middle name and my first name are the two names that I wanted, but they're combined, so that I can have both of them in my name. Because never have liked my middle name either, so why not change both? And she called me my name, and hearing my name, not the nickname, my actual name, on my mom's tongue was just like it just made me well up. I was so proud. I was so like, if you're a parent and you're ever watching this and your kid, even if they're not trans, wants to be called something, just call them that. You will make them feel so freaking good. Even if it's a phase and they change their mind later, just call them what they want to be called. It was like one of the best feelings. Just seriously, one of the best feelings. Anywho, yay, parents! I told my mom, sometimes I feel like I only have one parent and my parent is you. And she was like, "Aw." My nephew rescued his little sister, um, and you could hear the pride in her voice. They had been whitewater rafting and the raft popped. They were using an inflatable raft and it got ripped, and she was hooked on a log and was getting sucked under into the water and stuff. And he managed to leap across some rocks and get onto that log and haul her up out of the water and pull her up so that she didn't get sucked into the undertow of the whitewater rapids and stuff, and saved his sister. And you know that's awesome. He deserves credit for that. And you can just hear the love and the pride in her voice when she talks about people, when she talks about her children and her grandchildren. You can hear the pure sentiment. She drips with it, like every word. It's not just me that she makes feel good like that. I appreciate that about her, because she doesn't just teach me how I want to be treated, she teaches me how I want to treat other people just by being herself. I have a very good mom, and I'm glad that my hard headed father made some compromises with her and stopped being such a fool. And I'm glad that it doesn't have to retire immediately. She can retire when she wants to, and retire with all of her vacation time, which is great. She deserves that. She is a hard worker, a good person. I'm very glad. Anywho.